I got some
Perfect.
comments here. Give me just a moment. Oh, this was Joshua. No big deal. Ok. Saludos a todos. Bienvenidos. ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal? Hoy estamos aquí preparados, ya listos para entrar a esta entrevista, ¿verdad? Con el doctor John J. Collins. Así que solamente quiero darles la introducción en español. El tema de esta entrevista va a ser su libro sobre la imaginación apocalíptica. Y este libro fue traducido al español, así que está publicado por, aquí le voy a dar aquí, ¿cómo se llama? Publicidad, querigma. Así que abróchense sus cinturones. Si tienen preguntas, ¿verdad? Por favor, déjenlas ahí. Vamos a hacer lo posible porque el doctor Collins las pueda abordar. Y con eso, pues, Joshua, no sé si tienes algo que decir para entrar de lleno. Tú me indicas.
Bueno, en primer lugar, agradecerte, Mark, por la invitación. Agradecer al doctor John Collins. Saying thank you to you both to take me in count, por tomarme en cuenta para esta presentación, por llamarme como coanfitrión, cosa que me parece un honor. Yo en representación, evidentemente, de la Escuela de Alexandria y sobre todo por mi área, que tiene mucho que ver con el área del doctor Collins. De verdad estoy muy agradecido. Y nada, esperemos que sea de su agrado. Por obvias razones, el lenguaje que vamos a manejar va a ser mayoritariamente en inglés, porque el doctor no maneja el español, pero bueno, esperemos eso no sea un problema.
Okay, all right. So with that in mind, let's hit the intro right now. All right, welcome back, everybody. So today is another episode. Welcome to your Verano 1711 podcast, produced by Business Productions. You hear your host, Marv, and my co-host, Joshua Mendez. Joshua, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Marv. Thank you. As I say before in Spanish, I really feel honored by all you both because you consider me somehow to be part of this interview, to be in front of one of the titans of the scholarship. I actually being closer with many of his books, and actually in different comics, it's always quotations about him. So it's amazing. I'm actually very happy.
Yeah, yes, we are. And people, today we have a super duper guest. Yes, you read it right. We got John J. Collins, Professor John J. Collins. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great, sweet. People, this is a special treat for you. I mean, I've been longing for this this interview. I just remember when I sent an email to Dr. Collins, he immediately said, I'm traveling right now. Please write me later. We're gonna be able to set up something there, and we did. Gladly we did, and here we are. So today we're gonna be talking about a book that started. Well, it was published in 1984, if I'm not mistaken. Dr. Collins can correct me if I'm right. And that book has been highly praised. I'm not kidding. Trust me. You can go and read the reviews. That book is about the apocalyptic imagination and how that has become a thing. So now we're in the third edition, and which is more important, it was translated into Spanish. So, Dr. Collins, just before we can go into the question, tell us about that book, how special it is to you, and tell me how have you experienced the whole development, how this book has came to be. Please tell us about that.
Oh, I mean, this has run through my whole academic career. When I was a graduate student, we had a young professor at Harvard named Paul Hansen, who had just written a dissertation that was published with the title The Dawn of Apocalyptic. And he had a seminar on apocalyptic literature, and I already had some interest in the subject, but that was really what got me started on it already as a graduate student. And then in the 70s, I and also my wife were involved in a project, a forms and genres project in biblical literature, and working on defining a genre, apocalypse. And that came out in 1979. I think you've had the cover of it there in the journal Semea, number 14. And then the apocalyptic imagination, that what we had in the journal Semea was really the bare bones of a genre, just listing the elements by which you recognize it. But then the apocalyptic imagination was my attempt to put flesh on the bones, to put those writings in context and explain how do they actually work. And so that was what got me started on it. It's gone through 3 editions. At the moment, I'm working on a little supplement volume to it. I didn't quite want to do another edition at this point, but I want to have a supplement that will address some of the current questions, and I'm sure we'll come back to those as we go along.
Well, Dr. Collins, I wish you were to live up to, those years that the patriarchs in the past, they were able to live more than 100 years so we can enjoy your scholarship. Joshua, I don't know what you have to say about that.
I mean
that was... I would like to listen to this man talking about how the whole thing has developed. What say you?
Well, I mean, in my case, it's very impressive to see that this work... something I always say in the classes, in the different modules that I have in the seminar, is that it's impressive how it's different, the theology, when it's studied in the scholarship in Europe, science in South America, because sadly, South America is quite getting behind in few parts, that when they approach in different way to, for example, apocalyptic, they still like holding really stronger some ideas from probably more North American ideas rather than in this part of the world, when I can say apocalyptic is really like very brand new. I think is the best way to say it. And I'm very happy. Actually, I always have to say this as a form of recognition. When some good book is translated into Spanish, that's a good sign. That means scholarship is changing. That means South America is having access to good theology. For example, I get really happy. This is my mom's gift, a Christmas gift from the last year. Not this last, the last one. As G.K. Bale Apocalipsis brief commentary. I'm still behind the big touch one. This is like, okay, this is good. It's brief. It's quite smaller, but it's in Spanish. It's good sometimes to know that you have access to this kind of works in Spanish, that scholarship is taking really serious to translate it, good information, and at the same time to approach to a different point of view, because we normally say the apocalyptic, at least in South America, Dr. Collins, is a very end days thing. It's always
the end of the world.
Yeah, it's always we are about to die. So you say, okay, that's
We're all
not.
gonna
It is
die.
a lot more than that. So I'm very happy that this is being translated into Spanish. I'm very happy that this is actually the result of many years of research, and that's something I want to give a public recognition.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, Dr. Collins, what about if we go and hit the first question to you, okay?
Yep.
And the first question is showing up on the screen. What is the apocalyptic literature and what's its relevance for any serious student of the Bible?
Okay, the apocalyptic literature is something that appears first at the end of the Old Testament and then in the New Testament period, and then it went on for centuries after that.
Yeah.
So sometime in the Old Testament, the only real representative of it is the book of Daniel. And Daniel, if you pick up a modern Bible, Daniel will be called prophecy. And I mean, there's certainly like prophecy, but it's also different. And the difference is of two kinds. First of all, Daniel doesn't deliver oracles the way, say, Jeremiah did. He tells visions. Now, you get visions in the earlier prophets too, but it's all visions in the apocalyptic literature. And then the visions are largely about the kind of apocalypse you get in the book of Daniel, at least. They're about history, and history coming to a climax.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
you get some of that in the earlier prophets as well, but this time the climax is cosmic, it's universal.
Universal.
And it will end with the destruction of this world, or this world as we know it, and then the resurrection of the dead. And I would underline many times the key difference is the resurrection of the dead and the afterlife. This is something you don't get in the earlier part of the Old Testament. And it's absolutely fundamental, for without this, you could not have had Christianity arise. Now, I don't mean to restrict the relevance of apocalypticism to Christianity, but that is a major historical factor.
Yeah.
So, why is it relevant? Well, first of all, I would say if you want to understand how the New Testament developed out of the Old Testament, you have to know the apocalyptic literature, and not just the book of Daniel, but also the books of Enoch and Ezra and Baruch and the other apocalypses that are not in the biblical canon, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of this. These are all the books that reflect a change that happened in the religious tradition in the Hellenistic and early Roman period. So that's the historical reason why one needs to know about the apocalyptic literature.
Yeah.
The second one you touched on already when you were bantering back and forth there with Joshua, and that is people are fascinated with the end of the world.
My family is fascinated. I mean, with the whole war going on in Ukraine, oh my goodness, the end of the world, my child, you need to be ready. Yeah. Everybody is
reading a book at the moment called Stories We Tell About the End of the World.
Yeah.
Everything's Got to Go is the name of the book. I forget the name of the author.
I agree.
But he's mainly dealing with a whole series of things, like the atomic bomb was a huge impetus that put this on the agenda. Nowadays, it's more climate.
Yeah.
But if it's not one crisis, it's another. And the world has been looking like it's going to end for as long as we've been recording history. So, and unless it actually does end, then the apocalyptic literature will remain interesting and relevant.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now, Dr. Collins, I've been, and I'm pretty sure Joshua has been doing, because we love scholarship. We love you guys. We just hats off to you because of all the work you do, the resources, all the time you put into all this. So, as we are skimming through, the whole sea of literature, immense amount of literature out there, I keep just running into this concept about apocalyptic, and I understand, and you better than no one, you can tell me if that's true or not, but there's still some debates, not reaching consensus. What's the terminology, the concept? We need to work on this concept. So, but when it comes about apocalyptic, I keep running into this, and I wanna read it very briefly. And this is something taken from your 1979 Semea 14 book, if we can call it book, right? You can tell me about that. It says apocalyptic, according to Dr. Collins, is a genre of revelatory literature with a narrative.
I say apocalypse.
Yeah.
Now, I think you have a question on here somewhere about the different terminology.
Yeah.
I don't use apocalyptic as a noun.
There you go.
I use that as an adjective.
Yeah. So this concept that I'm reading has to do with apocalyptic or apocalypsis. You tell me.
Apocalypse.
Apocalypse. Okay.
Apocalypse
So,
is a literary genre which
yeah,
tells of a revelation.
exactly.
Okay, to cut through a little bit of this, all talk about apocalypse or apocalyptic goes back to the book of Revelation.
Exactly.
That's where the name comes from. It's that of the word apocalypse means revelation, but the way it's used means a revelation that is somewhat like what you get in the book of Revelation. Now,
Yeah.
in our project that led to the publication in Samea 14, we wanted to broaden that base because there was a lot of literature that was being loosely referred to as apocalyptic. And what we did was line it up, go through and say, how much do these texts actually have in common? And are they in the same literary form? Do they have the same content? And that's how we did it. So, we wanted to have a broader base than just the book of Revelation. That shouldn't be just the norm for everything, but that's really what it goes back to.
And that's the thing, because I've seen many scholars using this concept that you just developed. I mean, N.T. Wright was one in his book, People of God in the New Testament. He quotes you and he says, there's a lot of debate on this, but I will go with John Collins.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're good to go on that. So
actually, I've just been having an argument with another scholar. As to, how one regulates the concept, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
And because my idea was that you look at the literary apocalypses. That's more or less, that's what that word comes from. And then what we call apocalyptic should be material that is at least like that. You can also get it in other genres.
Yeah.
You can get it where they don't tell you the story of how somebody got the revelation, but they give you the content.
Yeah.
But I say the genre should be the touchstone.
Okay.
Now, this other scholar that I was arguing with says, no, it should be apocalypticism. And I asked him, how do you decide what is apocalypticism? And he didn't really have an answer for that. But in practice, what he does is still go back to the book of Revelation or something like it.
You guys, if I can say this, Dr. Collins, you guys have, you even have, go to symposiums. I remember the Uppsala 1979. You guys, trying to work on this. Let's come together and work on this concept and let's see what happens. Okay, Dr. Collins, let's move on to the second question because we want to value your time. Okay, and the second question will appear on your screen right now. So, Professor Collins, how do you conceptually differentiate apocalypticism, apocalyptic, apocalypse, apocalyptic eschatology, and why does it matter?
Okay, first of all, don't use apocalyptic as a noun.
Gotcha.
It's an adjective. Okay, it means apocalyptic is material that is like what you get in an apocalypse. What is an apocalypse? An apocalypse is an account of a heavenly revelation that has to do with eschatology. And other things too, but must at least include eschatology. Now, what is apocalyptic eschatology? Well, apocalyptic eschatology is essentially the judgment of the world, including the judgment of individuals after death.
Okay.
The final judgment. And so what comes after it is heaven or hell, if you like. It is not about it may involve the transformation of this earth, but that isn't the bottom line. There's always still another end beyond that. In the book of Revelation itself, you have two endings, really. With the first one is the coming of Christ, and then you get the millennium. But at the end of the millennium, you have a resurrection, and that's when you really get to the end of things. And then apocalypticism, I would call a worldview, Another scholar recently said we should call it an imaginary, which is okay. I think in some ways that's attractive. It's a way of imagining the world.
Yeah.
And what way of imagining the world? The way of imagining the world that you get in Apocalypses.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's move on, people. We got question number 3 right here. And it goes like this. So how does the early Enoch literature fit into the framework of the apocalyptic imagination?
First of all, you got to know what is the early Enoch literature.
Yeah, what is that? I have no idea.
This is there's a book of Enoch that is preserved in Ethiopia and is regarded as scripture, the book of Enoch the prophet. Now, this was only discovered, really, or rediscovered in the late 18th century by a Scottish traveler who brought back 4 copies of it.
Okay.
And then this was translated. And when this was translated, people sat up and took notice and said, gee, this looks a lot like what you get in the book of Revelation. And maybe these aren't just one-off revelations. There looks to have been a whole kind of literature like that. And then later on, parts of this book of Enoch were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's very important because the Ethiopic manuscripts come from the Middle Ages, but the Dead Sea Scrolls come from the 1st or 2nd century before Christ. And so this shows that it was indeed, now scholars had indeed figured that out early on, but there are always some people who say that if you don't have the ancient manuscripts, then you're not sure. Well, so finding the Dead Sea Scrolls was enormously important for proving the antiquity of this material. Now, what's in this book of Enoch? Well,
what's in there?
The key thing in it is, all that the Bible says about Enoch was that he walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. Now, he walked with God in the original Bible probably meant he was a good guy. But it was taken to mean later on that he walked with the angels, that he hung out with the angels. And this gave rise to the idea that he had gone up to heaven and been taken on a tour. And this is what you get in the Book of the Watchers, the first section of First Enoch. Enoch is taken on a tour. And he sees where the dead are kept waiting for judgment. He sees the storehouses of the rain and the wind and the snow. And the idea, you see, was that those things, that there are actually storehouses up there and that God releases rations of them from time to time. And he sees where the Garden of Eden was, and he sees all sorts of things that a normal person couldn't see. But also included in that is he sees the place where God will come down to judge the world for good. And then there are other sections of First Enoch where he is given the tablets of destiny. And these show what is going to happen in the whole course of history. Now, Enoch supposedly lived before the flood. He didn't start to publish until the 2nd century BC. I always told this to my doctoral students. If you're slow getting your career off the ground, think of Enoch.
Okay.
You have thousands of years passed before Enoch, and then he made it. And once he got that first thing published, they just flowed out after that.
I will take inspiration from Enoch.
Yes.
I jot it down.
You see, there's a huge advantage to delayed publication if you're prophesying things. Because then by the time the book comes out, you know whether it happened or not. And in fact, if you don't actually write it until just before it comes out, then you can predict all sorts of things that have already happened. And that this is one of the devices that they use in the apocalyptic literature, prophecy after the fact. And
That's
if you recite 1,000 years of history,
yeah,
and you're getting it all right, and then you come to the last bit, and that hasn't happened yet. So people are more likely to believe you. Now, but unfortunately, usually that last bit doesn't work out the way it's predicted.
no, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, you know, I'm not sure if you're familiar or Joshua, but I have heard the term. What is the term? Predictive programming. I don't know if you have heard that term, but it's this concept where you can foresee the future by manipulating the events that's going to take place in the future. So some have said that is something that they were doing in the past. I'm not sure, but as I'm listening to you, they were talking about this event when they already happened, right? And looking back.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Enoch didn't actually write those books.
Yeah.
Right. This is what we call pseudonymity, ascribing books to somebody who didn't write them. And, this may be done in a way in good faith as a literary convention. If you think of this as fiction.
Fiction, yeah.
So you put yourself in the position of Enoch. And then you tell what you think Enoch would have known or Enoch would have said.
Yeah.
And if you don't like how it comes out the first time, then you go back and you write it again a slightly different way.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Collins, I need to ask you a favor. Can you please move to the right? Just so we can have the full. There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joshua, I don't know if you have any comments so far about what Dr. Collins is telling us about these questions.
Well, I have a problem there because I got prepared my questions, but I have all other questions now. So it's like which ones I will pick.
Okay, just so you know, I'm going to complete my questions here, and then we're gonna go with
just
Joshua's.
One question straight to you, Marv. Why the nobody can comment on the feed of the channel? Just
because they need to subscribe first.
Oh, okay. But if even they subscribe, they cannot talk immediately, or they can talk.
Yeah, if they go and hit subscribe, they will be able to submit the comments.
Okay, let me tell them in Spanish because they maybe don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe that's why it's not many people around. Rapidito les comento en español que el canal, para ustedes poder escribir sus preguntas en la caja de comentarios, tienen que suscribirse. Una vez que se suscriben al canal, se les activa la opción y pueden comentar. Si quieren que haya preguntas de la audiencia que quizás se puedan llevar al doctor, hagan eso. Un saludo, gracias.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's continue with the questions. Dr. Collins, we got the fourth question right here. I like this one particularly. Yeah. So, in what ways is the apocalyptic used in books such as 4th Ezra, 2nd Baruch, and the apocalypse of Abraham, since they are after the fall?
Well, you in at least in 4th Ezra and 2nd Baruch, you have much more emphasis on the restoration of Israel than you had in the earlier books. Like in the books of Enoch and Daniel even. Now, there are two, the traditional hope and expectation in ancient Israel was for the restoration of the land. Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians, Judah was destroyed by the Babylonians, and the hope was that this would all be restored. Now, in the early apocalyptic books, on the other hand, you're not so much looking for restoration in this world as you're looking for an afterlife with the angels.
Yeah.
So now the book of Daniel still allows for a kingdom that will be given to the people of the Holy Ones of the Most High, but that's not where the emphasis is. The emphasis is on the angelic world and the end of this world. So this is a different tradition. Now, eventually then they work the two of those together. And what you will typically get in an apocalypse like 4th Ezra and also in the book of Revelation is a messianic age on earth which is then followed by a general resurrection and judgment.
Yeah.
So in the book of Revelation, this is the millennium.
Yeah.
In 4th Ezra, it lasts 400 years. And at the end of that, even the Messiah will die. But then you'll have the resurrection. So that's how they put those together, and that's how they accommodate the hope for the restoration of Israel. Now, this didn't just arise after the destruction of Jerusalem. You get this also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example.
Oh, yeah.
For that. But I think that's the way it comes out in those apocalypses. The apocalypse of Abraham is a bit different. We only have it in Slavonic.
It's a thing of its own.
I'm not so sure really what to make of it. But.
Yeah. I personally love the Apocalypse of Abraham. I have been lately reading a lot from Andrei Orlov from Marquette University.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, I reached out to him, Dr. Orlov, would you come on to the show? And he said, I don't do podcasts. I just love writing. And I say, no worries. That's fine. We can do it some other time. Okay, let's go with the fifth question. Dr. Collins, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. I know, just to make us some space for us in your schedule. Dr. Collins, you are emeritus, right? You're already enjoying.
So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, by the way, you were recently at the jail. I think it was in the Anchor Bible.
The Anchor
There's
Bible,
a new editor,
yes.
right? I think
I'm
it's
just coming to the end. I've been editing that for 17 years.
Yeah, I know.
I am done with it at the end of April.
No more. Enough.
No more.
You've been taking enough from Dr.
Well, maybe a little bit more, but
yeah. No, but I was asking you. Candida Moss took office, right? She's replacing you.
Yeah.
Okay. She will have to fill big shoes right there, and I'm pretty sure she will do a pretty good job.
She's well capable.
I know. Yeah.
She's a good.
And I'm planning on bringing her here to the show as well. Okay. Let's go with the question here. The fifth question, which is good because we're good on time. Let's see. So, the first edition of this book was published in 1984. My goodness, it's been a while. I mean, I was born in 1993. I don't know Joshua, but I was not even there. And Dr. Collins was just already around doing stuff there. So, Dr. Collins, what kind of new debates and insights have emerged in the study of the apocalyptic ever since?
Okay, let me give you a couple of points. First thing, most of the Dead Sea Scrolls, most of the fragmentary Dead Sea Scrolls were only published in the 1990s. The big ones like the War Scroll and the Community Rule, those had been published in the 50s. But only in the 90s did we get all the fragmentary texts. Now, if we had those when we were doing our definition of the genre, we might have done it a little bit differently, because you get more examples. For example, you get a lot of prophecies of history that don't talk about the resurrection, and they belong somewhere in this broader category. But in any case, the Dead Sea Scrolls gave us new material to work with. Second point, and related to that, is there is an endless debate as to how you should define your categories.
Okay.
Now, you see, it is not the case that all these books said that the book of Daniel was called in antiquity an apocalypse. And in fact, it was generally regarded as prophecy, but it doesn't even call itself prophecy. It talks about visions. It doesn't have an overarching title for it. And you can always, draw the lines in somewhat different ways. For example, in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, you have the vision of Nebuchadnezzar's statue.
Yeah.
And 4 kingdoms, and at the end of it, the whole statue is destroyed, and the kingdom of God will come. Nothing said about resurrection or judgment of the dead. Now, in Daniel 7, you have a very similar vision, again, 4 kingdoms, but at the end of that, in Daniel 12 at least, you do have resurrection and judgment of the dead. Now, should you then define your entity in a way to include all of that, or the narrower one? And, there are different ways of doing it, and these are our ways of doing it, because in antiquity, they weren't concerned to define their categories like that. So this is modern people trying to analyze it, and the question is, which is the more helpful way to do it? So that's an ongoing debate. And then I would say the third one, which is somewhat related to that, is that that there is a tendency at present, to go back to the original categories. And I think this is actually kind of problematic because you didn't have literary critics in antiquity. They weren't trying to analyze the material. And so if you then take, if you categorize all visions together, you're going to end up lumping together very different kinds of visions. So I think there are limits to how far you can go back to the original categories. But that's a debate. And the other debate that's somewhat related to that is, can you trust material that we don't have in its original language? So if you take, for example, the Book of Enoch, there is a section in the Book of Enoch called the Similitudes of Enoch, which is very important potentially, because there is a figure in that called that Son of Man, who is based on a figure in Daniel chapter 7. And this is very interesting because you get a lot of talk in the New Testament about the Son of Man. But we only have the similitudes in Ethiopic in manuscripts from the Middle Ages. And so you have some people saying, oh, this is probably a late Christian composition. Now, I don't believe that, because the similitudes never say, and the Son of Man is Jesus. And I don't believe any Christian would have written a text like that without making clear that the Son of Man was Jesus. So yeah. I think this surely is a Jewish text. But at the same time, the critics have a valid point that if a document is translated first, probably composed in Aramaic, translated into Greek, translated into Ethiopic, and copied for 1,000 years, are there likely to be changes introduced as that's passed along? Sure,
yeah.
But we do the best we can with the material that we have. But now that is, I think, one of the hot debates at the moment is, which should you be more concerned about? Possibly including people in the literature of the ancient world that are different, that weren't actually there, or losing things of the heritage of ancient literature because we don't happen to have ancient manuscripts of it. So that's another of the burning questions, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go with the last question of mine here, so we can move to Joshua's questions. Make it just very quick. I just put it right here. Oh, there you go. Okay, so question number 6. Where did it go? I can see it. Okay, now my computer is possessed. Well, there you go.
I think this time, the last one. Oh, okay. Yeah. What is it about the
Joshua is over
the Roman period? Well, that's maybe a little bit too specialized to get into here. But now I would say this.
Okay.
The literature, the apocalypses from the diaspora in the Roman period, I have a chapter on those.
Yes, you have.
In 3rd Baruch, 2nd Enoch. These now are the really controversial books nowadays, because we don't have them in their original language. And they are different. They're different even from the older apocalypses, because they have very little interest in the land of Israel or the restoration of Jerusalem. They're very much oriented towards heaven. And some Jewish scholars in particular don't want to accept them as Jewish. Now, I have always read those as being a way of coping with the destruction of Jerusalem. In 3rd Baruch, the angel actually says to Baruch, don't worry so much about Jerusalem. And now there's a Jewish scholar who just can't believe that any Jew would say that. But you see, I think after Jerusalem was destroyed, what were you going to do? There were people who were worrying about it and, couldn't move on. And that I think what 3rd Baruch is saying, you got to move on. Focus on the world above. And that's in large part what apocalyptic literature does anyway.
Now, I like the way you put it right there before, just at the outset, because to better understand the New Testament in those sections, I mean, there's a whole conversation nowadays, the apocalyptic Paul,
Yep.
So this is very important to be familiar with this literature and genre all about, to better interpret, should I say, Paul and the way he was writing. What was the aims that he had in mind in his social, religious, philosophical, political context. And to my understanding, Dr. Collins, the apocalyptic imagination, the apocalyptic literature is just taking and drawing from all of that. I mean, when it has to do with the writers, they are dealing with that.
Now, I mean, there are other things in Paul besides apocalypticism, but you can't understand Paul without apocalypticism.
Yeah.
Because one of the big ideas, 1 Corinthians 15, is
the resurrection
has begun.
Yeah.
I like that. It's already underway.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. That's like the most obvious big concept right there. Okay, so I'm done with my questions here, and now we're gonna move on with Joshua's question. So Joshua,
yes,
go.
just one thing. Do you mind? One of my students and friends, she's writing on the feed. I would like to, if I can translate in English her question to the doctor after mine, and if it's possible, if I can translate it for her in Spanish that she can understand the answer.
Sure.
Okay, but now we do have to keep an eye on the clock.
Yeah. I have it. Just mine will be in English, and then just hers.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, is New Testament Christology developed more on concepts found in the apocalyptic literature or the Hebrew Bible? I would say more what you find in the apocalyptic literature. But now, what you've got to remember is that people in the New Testament period were reading the Hebrew Bible through the lens of the apocalyptic literature.
Okay.
So that apocalypticism, among other things, is a kind of hermeneutic. It gives you, a lens through which you look at things. So they would still cite the Old Testament and cite that where they much more than Enoch, for example. But they're citing it on an understanding that is itself determined to a great degree by the apocalyptic literature.
Great. Amazing. Well, we go for the second one.
Oh, yes.
If you can put it straight away in English.
Let's go with the second one.
Yep.
And Joshua, you go first. Read the question to Dr. Collins, and then he will be answering your question, okay?
Yeah, it's to make sure that I'm making myself clear, because I know some of them, maybe because they are translated, they are not clear.
Okay. All right, so let's go with the second question right now. Just a moment. My machine still is possessed. I don't know what's going on. Okay, there you go.
Okay, is the apocalyptic reading of the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible events in light of Second Temple fall?
I'd say the apocalyptic literature rereads the Old Testament in light of Second Temple thought. I wouldn't say that is all it is. There were many ways of rereading the Old Testament in light of Second Temple thought. And not everybody in that period was into apocalypticism.
Yes, my question is more like regards to, for example, to be more clear, the book of Jubilees. I understand it's not proper apocalypse, but it looks like it's a rereading of Genesis. So
it is a rereading of Genesis. Now, and Jubilees is a very complex book. The main obsession of Genesis is rereading of Jubilees, is rereading Genesis to make it conform to later Jewish law.
wow.
So that, Adam was already observing the Torah in the Garden of Eden, practically.
Oh, really?
That's what's going on.
Was he doing that?
That's what's going on in Jubilees.
They didn't tell me that in Sunday
There are
school.
apocalyptic elements in it too. But the purity obsession. The Dead Sea Scrolls give you several examples of this, especially with the prophets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where it's taken for granted in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They say this explicitly. God didn't tell Habakkuk what he was talking about. God gave a revelation to Habakkuk, but Habakkuk didn't have any clue what this was all about, because it was really about the people who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they wouldn't come along for another 500 years.
Wow.
Also in 4th Ezra, now 4th Ezra has a vision of a figure who comes on clouds, and if you've read the book of Daniel, you know who this is. But the angel says to Ezra, this is the vision that in this case actually it's the 4th beast he's talking about, that the 4th beast that your brother Daniel saw in his vision, only I didn't explain it to him the way I'm explaining it to you. So they were quite well aware that this was a new interpretation, but they thought the new interpretation was inspired or revealed and better. And you get a lot of that in the New Testament too.
All right.
Amazing. The third question.
Let's go with the third question. Give me just a moment. There you go.
Dicte
in general, the apocalyptic writers didn't expect God to do his own fighting.
Okay.
No self-respecting king. The Roman emperor didn't go out and lead his army into battle.
Yeah.
And neither did the Syrian kings or the Egyptian kings. So God sends the archangel Michael in the war scroll, or the one like a son of man. And, even if the one like a son of man is identified as Jesus in the Gospels, they don't yet have the idea of a Trinity. He isn't yet on a par with the Most
they
High.
don't have that. Yeah.
So in general, no, God has agents who do the dirty work.
Okay, can I break in here, because I think this is a very important question. Sorry about that, because I need to ask this question. Dr. Collins, what about the binitarianism thing, the two powers, what about that? Is part of the angels, acting as an agent?
One of the things that develops, first of all, really in the book of Daniel, is the idea of a second power in heaven.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Now, first of all, you got to get clear in your head. The Old Testament is not monotheistic.
Yeah.
If by monotheistic you mean that only one God exists,
it is not.
Heaven is full of gods.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they're not all equal.
It's saturated.
And that's always the debate in the Old Testament. But they're always they say, "Who is like you among the gods?"
Yeah.
He's a kind of an
It's
atheistic
not, are
idea,
there any
actually.
other gods? Of course there are other gods, but nobody like you. And so, that's but now what you get beginning in the book of Daniel is the idea that a second God is superior to the rest of them, even though not yet on a par with the Most High.
Yeah.
And that's the one like a son of man in the book of Daniel, comes riding on the clouds of heaven. The only person who comes riding on the clouds of heaven in the Old Testament is the God of Israel, Yahweh.
Yeah.
But we still have the Ancient of Days. It's quite interesting
The
how,
Ancient
for
of
example,
Days is still above him.
Yeah.
No, my very interesting point here in two ways, this is just a brief commentary, is that actually we found quite this divine bureaucracy here on the way that this Ancient of Days looks very, very similar to God El in Canaanite mythology, instead that this second figure looks like Baal. So it's very clear that this idea is there, but it's just like it doesn't cross the line still. And it's interesting because I do believe that actually first Christian could be Unitarians in this way. They found Christ like similar to God, but behind.
Now, there is a scholar in Israel named Michael Siegel who is writing a new commentary on the book of Daniel. But he thinks that the one like a son of man in Daniel 7 actually is Yahweh.
Yeah.
Originally. And that there was a higher God. He was presenting this at the Society of Literature one year.
It could be possible.
He asked an older Jewish scholar, Moshe Bernstein, when I'm referring to the Most High, should I say Hashem, the name? How should I refer to him? And Bernstein said to him, if you're saying that there's another God above him, you got bigger problems than what you call him.
Yeah, you're gonna hit big trouble.
I think this is the important part of the Deuteronomic in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Deuteronomy 32, chapter 8 and 9, it makes a difference here, really different, because that's ancient song. Well, we can go to the next.
Okay,
let's move on to
we're almost out of time here. So I'd say take one more of your questions. Drop that one you had about the Apocrypha. I don't even know what you were getting at there. So drop that one. Ask me the other one, and then the question from your student, and we'll finish with that.
Yeah.
What do you think is the reason that prompted writers of Apocrypha? I prefer to explain that in my own words. It's I did realize the Old Testament theophanies of Yahweh, they could be considered too stronger, probably. My question is, this, in last instance, it looks like the Second Temple Judaism in Apocalyptic tried to replace God or these theophanies with a kind of angel. For example, in the Apocalypse of Abraham, Jehoel, it looks like he's taking the place of Yahweh in the Old Testament.
Look, if you pick up the book of Enoch, the very first thing you see is a theophany. So, they don't have any problem with the theophany, but usually the theophanies are reserved to the last minute. So, everything will have been cleaned up in history before God appears for the final judgment. But you can still have a theophany. So it has more to do with how does God run the world? Does God keep butting in himself, or does he entrust that work to his agents, the angels?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's move on to the last question. Dr. Collins, let's move on to the last question because we want to value your time, and it's right here. Go ahead, Joshua.
Do you think Revelations is to be taken as a work widely acquired on acquired on Jewish Apocalyptic, or just on the Hebrew Bible?
Well, the book of Revelation depends very obviously on the book of Daniel and also on Ezekiel. I don't think you can really prove that it knew the book of Enoch. And so, but now it certainly has a lot of the ideas that had emerged, since the book of Daniel was written. But in terms of the actual formulation, it stays much closer to the Hebrew Bible, especially to Daniel and Ezekiel.
Yes.
Why? I don't know.
I did realize something that for me is very clear in that point is that, for example, the book of Revelation, it looks like they are thinking in the same way as the Old Testament, that the new heavens and the new earth is just a new stage in this creation. It looks like. And it looks like that they're taking that more from Hebrew.
But still, it's a stage in this creation, but still at the end of it, there's a resurrection and a whole new ball game.
Wow. Okay. So I think we can go. Well, I mean, that's my last question in this amazing.
Give us the question from your student, if you have it.
Of course, yeah. I can take it from here and read it. Well, I would translate it in Spanish to English. This is Jelixa Chavez. That's a friend and student of mine. Her question is, she say, thank you for everything for the program. She's running a program called a comprehensive lecture, where she is reading and studying the letter to the Galatians right now. And now she's asking, by the language that the Apostle Paul is using it in this letter to the Galatians, it looks like very, very as apocalyptic language. I would like to know your knowledge about this. Is this a kind of apocalypsis, the letter to the Galatians?
Well, it presupposes a revelation. I think that's I would say it presupposes an apocalyptic revelation.
Yeah.
But it presupposes it. It doesn't describe it. There was a scholar named Lou Martin, who is now dead, who thought that Galatians, that this is what it is to be apocalyptic. That was his point of entry into the whole phenomenon.
He actually wrote a Galatians commentary, right?
Because it isn't in the form of an apocalypse at all. So no way is Galatians an apocalypse. An apocalypse is a narrative, first of all, where somebody says, I had a dream. Martin Luther King, maybe. But you have to have a narrative framework for an apocalypse. You don't have that in Galatians. But Galatians presupposes that Paul has had a revelation. He describes it much more in 1 Corinthians or in Romans, actually, but especially I think in 1 Corinthians, but the idea that there is a new revelation, something new has happened, there is a new creation now being revealed and so forth.
Okay.
Okay, I hope that's
amazing. Yes, if you just give me a second just to synthesize, to translate it to her. Profesor Collins nos ha dicho, Yelixa, por tu pregunta, que la epístola a los Gálatas presupone un apocalipsis porque es el lenguaje que maneja. Sin embargo, no mantiene la estructura tal cual de uno. Es decir, se presupone una revelación porque Pablo habla de una revelación. Él ha recibido una revelación de Dios y la está manifestando, pero dice que es mucho más evidente en la epístola de Corintios o mucho más evidente en la epístola de Romanos, en vista de que de hecho no mantiene la secuencia más estructurada de un apocalipsis, que por ejemplo Pablo no habla de un sueño o visión o oráculos, simplemente presupone un apocalipsis. En esos términos no sería un apocalipsis como tal la epístola a los Gálatas, pero sí que Pablo está hablando en unos términos claramente apocalípticos. Thank you. Exactamente.
Okay. I just wanna say one last thing. There is a scholar out there. I'm pretty sure Dr. Collins is familiar with that. James Scott just published. I think it was Fortress Press.
James
Apocalyptic. Yeah,
James Scott. Yes.
He wrote the apocalyptic letter to the Galatians. So you should be able to go and look into it just to be a little bit more and get yourself informed about that. Okay, so that's all the questions, people. We just want to say thank you first to Dr. Collins for being here with us. We really enjoyed this interview with him. Dr. Collins, final words, please. We just want to hear that before we go closing.
Thank you all. I really enjoyed it.
It will be amazing to have you one day in the Alexandria School.
Sooner or later, it will happen.
Yeah, I would go with that. I would go with that. Yeah, Joshua, final words, please. Hit us with
Yes.
that.
No, just want to say thank you to Dr. Collins, to everything. I mean, for me, it's an honor to have you here. I will to say it in public, I will love to have you in the Alexandria, in the Escuela de Alexandria. I will be your interpreter if you are agree with that. And Cars, you're always welcome. And obviously, I'm really happy to meet you. Amazing answers. I mean, it's a lot to see. I will buy your book straight away. That's for sure.
No, I would just say that this interview doesn't do justice to scholars, work, but we're trying just to get you closer a little bit to what they're doing, their writing, and everything. Okay, so before we go, just to remind you, Dr. James Vanderkam is ready to come into the show to talk about the Book of Jubilees. He is massive, 2 volumes on the Hermeneia series. Oh, by the way, you saw Daniel commentary Hermeneia. It was written by Dr. Collins, just 1994, I think it was. Yes, 1994. Yeah, 93. Okay, there you go. So we just keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that because we're gonna be working on that.
Which was the commentary of Daniel that you told me that it says the Son of Man is Yahweh? You say, Doctor?
That's Michael Siegel, and it's not out yet.
It's not out.
It's not published.
Wow!
Yet.
So that's
the commentary isn't published yet.
Dr. Collins
It'll be a new commentary in the Anchor Bible, but it'll be about 2 years before it comes out.
Yeah.
Wow.
He gave us that as a bonus.
And you will know that I predicted this before it happened.
There you go. So you are an apocalyptic guy, Dr. Collins.
You are a prophet. You are a prophet sent by the divine council. So amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. Until the next time. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.